Hey guys, Brent Hull Build Show, square peg, round hole. Today in the Build Show, come join me. Square peg, round hole, right? They say you can't put a square peg in a round hole. Not true. What I'm going to show you today and talk about is joinery, and historic joinery in particular. But because if you find windows and doors pre-1890, you will most likely find a peg holding that joint together. Now, the peg becomes a mechanical fastener because when that tenon fits into that mortise, the peg will go in there and keep the joint from coming apart. We've talked about that a lot when we talk about doors and we talk about windows. And so the other reason why you have a square peg and a round hole is because if you put a dowel, and I drilled a 5/16 hole in this little board right here, if you drill and put a dowel, a 5/16 dowel into that thing, it will wiggle loose over time. Now, why is that? Well, because wood expands and contracts. We actually need the teeth that are on this peg in order to, get it to stick and to stay in there. Now, I'm going to show you kind of how to do this and the techniques. And the fun thing about this is I get to use hand tools, right? Drilled the hole, 5/16 hole. I cut a 5/16 peg, okay? Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen it like a pencil, right? And I'm going to begin to just take off corners of this thing. So I'm taking down these corners and these details so that I can get basically like a pencil point that will start my hole. And I'm just kind of just taking my deal, and I can just set my plane down and just do it this way too. All right, I'm just taking off those sharp edges and kind of winding this thing up. Now, I might be a hair too big for this deal, and we'll see it split out. So it's a little bit kind of more art than science as far as getting it the right size. It depends on what kind of wood you're using. I'm using oak here, so it should be pretty stout, but now I've taken it down enough and so I can get it in there. Now, if you look at an arts and crafts peg, it oftentimes will sit proud. And so once I get this driven in here, there may be some ways that you want to orient this, like at an angle, or so that my little square butt looks really cool in here, okay? And so depending on whether I'm doing a piece of furniture or something else. If I'm building a door, most likely this gets painted over anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Now I'm just going to hammer it in, right? And once I get it in there far enough, and it's just kind of poking through the back side, right? And I know that it's kind of gone through there. And it tells me when it's to stop, right? That thing just chipped off. Now we've got to cut it. And so there's two ways to cut it. We can either cut it with a Japanese saw, which would allow me to lay the blade flat on the board and cut it off. But if I wanted any kind of raised peg coming out of the wood that might have some shape or some detail to it, I'm going to take a back saw. This is a Lee Nelson back saw. I'm just going to cut it, and I just want to be off the board enough that my teeth aren't going to cut the board. But so you can see that it's raised up about, I don't know, a 1/16. And now I get to take my chisel and come in here and just kind of shape it a little bit. And you got to have a sharp chisel to do this. Do the other side, same way. Make sure I'm off the wood so I'm not cutting my face in the wood, and then do it on the fourth side. Now what I've done now is I've just kind of squared it off and kind of shaped it a little bit to give a little bit of life. So it's no longer just kind of sawn cut, it's now chisel cut, which gives a little bit more life and character. Now, if I wanted, so right now it has some cool character. The great thing is when you put finish on this, the finish is going to take into the end grain of that oak, and this will appear much darker. So it's kind of a cool furniture detail if you wanted to do it that way. Now, there's kind of a cool faceted way. If you look at our English panel in the showroom, you'll see a bunch of different cool ways of having a sharp top there. But if I was just going to paint it and do it tight, then I would take my Japanese saw, lay it flat, and I'm just kind of pressing really lightly, but it allows me to come across here. Right? Now I've got kind of a flat thing. Put a little wax on here and show you kind of how that can spring to life and how it's kind of cool. But I use this wax, it's just a paste wax. But now, see how that kind of jumps to life, right? So now that I've got some really pretty details, there you see how decorative and how pretty a peg can be in furniture or in doors or whatever you're making. But square pegs really do fit in round holes, and we in fact need that round hole and that square peg to lock that peg into place. And so it's a great detail, it's a great historic detail, it's a detail you should be using. It creates a mechanical fastener that really helps things last a lot longer. Whenever glue does fail, you've got a joint that'll last 100 years. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Hull Millwork, Hull Homes. Sign up for the newsletter. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.